Mark pushed the cart slowly down the quiet supermarket aisle, the wheels squeaking against the polished floor. It was nearly midnight, and the place felt almost deserted. His 7-year-old daughter, Lily, clung to his side, her small hand gripping his as she tried to stifle a yawn. After a long day at work, Mark just wanted to grab some bread, milk, and a few other essentials before heading home. The soft hum of the overhead lights mixed with faint background music gave the store a strangely lonely feel, like a place stuck in time. When they reached the checkout counter, a young cashier greeted them with a tired smile. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She began scanning the items quickly, but Mark noticed something: her hands were trembling. At first, he thought it might be from the cold, but the store wasn't chilly. Her fingers fumbled slightly with the bread, and she kept glancing toward the clock. Lily, rubbing her eyes, rested her head against Mark's arm. He watched the cashier more closely now, a quiet concern growing in his chest. She was young, maybe early 20s, and there was a heaviness in her eyes that didn't match her age. As she handed him the receipt, her hands shook again, more noticeably this time. Mark's curiosity, and worry, overcame his hesitation. He leaned forward slightly and asked, "Are you okay?" The question hung in the air, carrying more weight than either of them could have expected. The question seemed to catch her off guard. She froze mid-motion, her hand still resting on the counter, gripping the edge like it might hold her steady. For a moment, she didn't look up, just stared at the register screen as if searching for the right words. The supermarket was so quiet that even the faint hum of the lights felt loud. Only Mark, Lily, and the cashier occupied the space, making the moment feel strangely intimate. When she finally looked at him, her eyes carried a mix of exhaustion and vulnerability. "It's just, a lot happened today," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark could tell she wasn't used to talking about herself, especially to strangers. She bit her lip, as though deciding whether to share more or retreat into silence. Lily shifted in the cart, watching the exchange with sleepy curiosity. The cashier glanced at her, then back at Mark, as if weighing whether he was someone she could trust. Her hands, still trembling, moved to stack the change neatly, though it was clear her mind was somewhere else. Mark didn't push her, but his expression told her he was willing to listen. There was no judgment in his eyes, only genuine concern. The world outside the store might have been moving on as usual, but right there, in that quiet moment, it felt like time had slowed, giving her the space to decide if she would let a stranger glimpse the weight she was carrying. She took a slow breath, as if gathering the courage to open a door she usually kept locked. Her voice was steady at first, but her eyes glistened as she spoke. She told Mark that she'd been working back-to-back shifts for weeks, barely sleeping, just to keep up with bills. Her parents had passed away 2 years ago, leaving her to care for her 14-year-old brother. Since then, she had been both sister and parent, holding their small world together with whatever strength she could find. Today, she explained, had been one of the hardest days yet. Her brother's asthma had worsened, and the medication he needed wasn't cheap. She had just enough money for either the rent or the prescription, but not both. She chose the medicine without hesitation, knowing it meant they might lose their apartment. Her hands shook harder as she spoke, and she quickly swiped at a tear before it could fall. "I don't want anyone's pity," she added quietly, her pride still intact despite the cracks in her voice. Mark felt his chest tighten, recognizing that kind of fight, the relentless battle to protect someone you love even when you're breaking inside. The store's empty silence wrapped around them, and in that moment, Mark saw past her uniform and polite smile. She wasn't just a cashier, she was a young woman standing in the middle of life's storm, trying to shield her brother from the rain with nothing but her own 2 hands. Mark stood there for a moment, his chest heavy with the weight of her words. He glanced at Lily, who was now fully awake, listening quietly, her wide eyes reflecting the seriousness of the moment. Without overthinking, Mark reached into his back pocket and pulled out his worn leather wallet. He didn't count the bills, he just knew what he was going to do. With a calm, steady hand, he slid enough cash across the counter to cover more than a month's rent. The cashier's eyes widened, and she instinctively shook her head. "I can't take this," she whispered, pushing the money back toward him. Mark gently nudged it forward again. "You can," he said firmly but kindly. "You're doing something incredible for your brother. But you shouldn't have to do it alone." His voice carried a quiet sincerity, the kind that didn't feel like charity, it felt like solidarity. For a second, she just stared at him, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Finally, she placed her hand over the money, her fingers trembling, not from exhaustion this time, but from disbelief. Lily leaned over the counter with a small smile and said, "It's okay. My dad likes helping people." The simple innocence in her voice seemed to break the last of the cashier's resistance, and her eyes filled with tears she no longer tried to hide. In that small, quiet grocery store, a stranger's kindness became an anchor in her storm. The cashier's tears spilled freely now, her hands covering her face as she tried to compose herself. She let out a shaky laugh between sobs, the kind that comes when relief finally breaks through the tension you've been carrying for far too long. "You have no idea what this means," she whispered, her voice cracking. Mark didn't need her to explain, he could see it in the way her shoulders lowered, as though a heavy weight had just been lifted. He simply nodded, offering a small, reassuring smile. Lily tugged gently at his sleeve, her sleepy eyes now bright. "Daddy," she said softly, "you made her smile." As they walked toward the exit, the cool night air rushed in through the sliding doors, and Mark felt something shift inside him. It wasn't about the money, he'd given more than bills tonight. He'd given her a moment of hope, a reminder that even in the hardest seasons, there are people willing to stand beside you. Behind them, the cashier wiped her cheeks, a faint smile breaking through as she clutched the cash like a lifeline. For her, it wasn't just rent, it was proof that the world still held kindness, that strangers could become miracles when you least expected it. Mark held Lily's hand a little tighter as they stepped into the quiet parking lot. The night suddenly felt warmer, brighter, and full of possibility, not because of what he had given, but because of what they had all received in return, the simple, undeniable power of compassion.